Good evening, everybody. It's 1:30 now, so I think if we may, we'll start the meeting. Just a bit of housework to begin with. There are no fire alarms scheduled for this evening. Therefore, if the fire alarm sounds, please evacuate the building immediately. The fire exit is located at the side of this room. Exit through reception and meet in the War Memorial Park. This meeting is being webcast live on the internet and will be available to view on YouTube after the meeting. Please switch mobiles off or onto silence. Thank you. First of all, apologies for absence and substitutions. Councillor Concheca is replaced by Councillor Stuart Frost. Any declarations of interest? No? Thank you very much. Urgent matters? I have no urgent matters. Minutes of the meeting held on November the 7th. Is anybody wish to comment on that, or is it accepted that? Agreed. Thank you very much. We'll sign that at the end of the meeting. So now we come on to the main course. Section approval for adoption of the proposed licensing fees and charges 2023-24. Our responsibilities this evening are to approve the licensing fees and charges set out in Appendix 1, which will apply from the 1st of April 2023, to approve the consultation on the Hackney's carriage and private hire fees and charges, and to authorise the Head of Environment and Community Services to make minor administrative amendments if required. Before we start on number 5, can I, on behalf of the committee, can I thank the portfolio holder for being present, because it's always helpful to have her here in case any members of the committee might wish to ask her any questions. Right, so we'll move on to the proposed licensing fees and charges. Does anybody wish to open the batting? Sorry. Yeah.
Okay, good evening. The proposed licensing fees and charges paper is for 2023-2024. Some of the main changes are around the Hackney carriage and private hire fees that haven't been increased since 2019. These will need to go out for approval once they have been approved by this committee for consultation, As you can see from the vehicles fees, the savings that we have made making the plates done externally has been passed back to the drivers. There has been a slight increase in the drivers' fees due to the legislation changes since 2019, including that of the tax check that came into force on the 4th of April 2022 and some others. We've also re-evaluated how we charge for operators, so we can truly reflect the cost of larger operators that have larger enforcement costs. I know some of those percentages look quite scary, so if you look at the 117% for the 46 plus renewal, is broken down over 5 years on page 18. So it's actually £256.40 a year over the 5-year length of the licence. We've restructured these fees to reflect the true cost on the licensing service. The Hackney carriage and private hire fees, we can only charge for what it costs the service. We aren't allowed to make a surplus, and if we do, that needs to be then refunded to the trade. The other fees and charges within the paper, the question that we get asked is the sex establishment fees and charges. They are very high because that is what it would cost with all of the public meetings that would be required if there was an application for a sex establishment within the borough. The rest have gone up by the annual 3%.
Thank you. Right. Does anybody wish to raise any comments? Councillor?
Yes, thanks, Chair. We need to be aware that there's a cost of living crisis out there. I mean, the people that are running these vehicles, they're not only just getting increased fees here, their fuel costs have rocketed. I just think, I mean, we should be looking at that as well. I mean, is it necessary to raise these fees at all?
Thank you, Councillor Fillimore. Yes, I think is the short answer to that one. We have frozen the fees for the trade for the last 3 years, which costs the authority a minimum of £3,000 a year for each year for the last 3 years. As Emma says, we've also been changing our processes, and that has seen a reduction in the vehicle fees. Bear in mind the vehicle fees are an annual fee. The driver's fee is a 3-yearly fee. So actually this is pretty much cost neutral for the vast majority of drivers. You know, the cost of servicing the licensing team certainly haven't dropped down. And I say £3,000 a year, that's a fairly conservative estimate. And we have done it by the minimum that we can as an authority, which is 3%. And I say in several cases the fees have actually dropped. So yeah, and again, you know, where we've got say larger increases, those are spread over multi-year licenses as well. So actually the increase here is as small as it can be. As Emma's already stated, we cannot make well, there's no question of making a profit on licensing, that's for sure. It's just a matter of how much money we as an authority lose on this as a service. Yes, we've done our best to protect the trade throughout the COVID pandemic with freezing the fees. We supported the trade by providing information on all the government schemes that were available, and we've been improving our efficiency. So I don't think we can do much more as an authority at this point in time, whilst protecting ourselves as well.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to move on to page 18, please, if we possibly can. And I would just like some modicum of justification how we can increase the 5-year private hire operator's licence, okay, for 46 plus vehicles by over 100%. Okay, that's both on the new operator licence and also the renewal. I'm just really struggling to understand why, you know, it takes so much more, okay, time, effort, money, okay, to register, you know, an operator that has 46 vehicles rather than say an operator that has 11 to 15 vehicles or even 6 to 10 vehicles where the cost has actually gone down. How can we actually justify that? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Frost. Very simply, the cost here is not the cost of issue of the licence. It is for things like the drivers and the issue of the plate, but for an operator there is the enforcement cost in here. And what we know within the borough is that we have a number of smaller operators, and you can see that we've actually reduced the cost for those smaller operators. And then we have one predominantly very, very large operator within the borough. And what we know as an enforcement team is that operator, by virtue of the number of vehicles and drivers that it supplies, has a very disproportionate number of complaints and enforcement requirements within the borough. That's simply due to their size and things that go with that. So, and actually we have virtually no operators in the middle ground there at this point in time. So we've got very few operators that operate more than 11 vehicles. And then we've got, say, the main operator that operates considerably more than 46. So what we've done is we have looked at where are we spending our enforcement time. Well, we're not spending it on the very small operators. where are we spending our enforcement time on our very large operator. So the costs there are reflective of that enforcement cost. The cost of administering the licence, as you say, is fairly insignificant in that bill. Plus, remember that cost is spread over a 5-year period. So I'm fairly comfortable with the figures that we've come out with here. Where, as I say, we're certainly not making any money on this.
Thank you for that. Any councillor? I'll see.
Just so I'm perfectly clear on this, are you implying for the 46 plus that in the year estimated 22 to 23 that we've made, or we will be making, a £700 loss?
Well, sorry. All licensing incurs cost, I'm afraid, Councillor Hussey. But at the moment, it's a matter of how much can we recover based on the fees that are set previously.
That's the question. The approved charge was 592. Now, the costs haven't gone up. Our incurred costs haven't gone up by 117%. I'm assuming that the 592 was pitched far too low, and therefore we didn't recover our costs. Is it true therefore to imply that we lost £700 in terms of cost recovery in 22-23?
I wouldn't give you a specific figure, but I think it's fair to say that we probably have been under recovering our costs.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I mean, I have to say that this is my first licensing meeting, and so I'd like to say thanks for throwing me into the deep end, Councillor Samir. Okay, but some of these charges are quite eye-watering. Is there going to be some sort of a payment plan, okay, that we can help? Or, for example, the one owner that has 46 plus vehicles for private hire that's going to have to fork out 1,282. Does he have to fork out that all in one go, or can he pay yearly?
It's a one-off cost payable at the start of the 5-year period. I can't say that I'm going to lose too much sleep over that particular operator finding 1,200 quid in one hit.
Just a supplementary, please, Chair. Okay, maybe that was a poor example, but if we have some of the smaller firms, okay, then I appreciate that while the cost may have gone down, okay, still finding, £800 or just under £800 for operating 11 to 15 vehicles, okay, I'm surprised that there isn't some form of a plan where we can help people with the cost of living crisis on there. Okay, is that still a one-off cost?
Yeah, they're all one-off costs because of the cost of issuing the license. It's a business cost. I can assure you that for most of our businesses, this is a fairly small percentage of their costs. They will spend considerably more than that on diesel in a week. There is these are businesses in the larger sense. These are not little one-man bands. They are businesses that employ multiple drivers, own multiple vehicles, own premises, operate premises. Yes, nobody welcomes any additional cost, but our costs are far from unreasonable.
I think Councillor Edwards was next.
Thank you, Chair. I just make an observation on the 5-year renewal for 46 plus cars. That for the 5 years, it's only under £28 per vehicle. So I don't think that's a big payment. However, if you look in comparison to one vehicle where it's £418, so I think this is where our concern lies, is with the smaller Hackney carriages. And my question is, we approved the fares increase. Have we done any cost analysis on the increase of fares compared to the increase of costs?
Okay, I'm afraid you may have fallen into one of the classic taxi traps here. So this is for private hire
Oh, okay.
rather than hackney carriage. So the private hire can charge what they like and do.
Oh no, sorry, I don't know if I was a bit unclear. So we've got the increase on hackney carriages.
Yeah.
Are they so the renewal fees and everything? So, so on just on the hackney carriages, sorry.
Sorry, yes. I mean, obviously there is some increase for the hackney carriages, but actually for the vehicles themselves, their fees have reduced. It's a minus 3% rise for the vehicles. There is an increase in the cost for the drivers, but the drivers is a 3-year badge as opposed to whereas the vehicle is an annual cost.
Thank you. So I think our concern from the hackney carriages side of things, from the increase of fares, we were concerned that the increase wasn't high enough. But I think if I'm happy to support these charges if hackney carriages have been looked at, which they have, and if they're minus, that's even better for us.
The reason that there's quite a lot of variation in the fees that are charged here, some will go up, some go down, is because we go through and we calculate what the costs are of doing this. And because we've made some process changes this year, so for the trade, for example, they've now all got self-adhesive plates on the back rather than plates that are manufactured by us. And they're far cheaper to produce, much more environmentally friendly. So we've saved that cost, and that cost has been removed from the fees and charges table. Where we've got drivers, whereas, as Emma said, we've got new processes that we need to undertake with regard to things like the test for tax, then and the NR3 check for other convictions, then those costs are increased. So those have been raised slightly. But it's very much done on a case-by-case basis, as you can tell by the number of different changes that are there.
Councillor Patty.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, one of the things that I would really like to know is how was a percentage change calculated?
Oh, from the...
Thank you.
Any more questions? Sorry, Councillor Jones.
Yeah, I've already been through this paper with Robert Draper earlier, so knew a lot of the answers. Only thing, they seem reasonable. Nothing's reasonable when fares go up, and I can't blame it. I'd be moaning if I had to pay them, but the way things are. Only thing I'd like, and I think we may be talking about it either at this meeting or later on, is how to encourage drivers into Basingstoke so we got more taxi, private hire and taxi people. I've had a word with yourself, as you know, but I think it's something we should be discussing, how we can get more people into the trade and get the thing working, because of certain, I suppose it's the same across everywhere, but at certain times of the day, Christmas, Easter, God knows when you want one, there isn't enough drivers to drive the blooming things. So it's just how we can encourage people to go into the trade, and I think Robert might be raising it today, but that's my issue. But that's it. Other than that,
I can safely say that your concerns will be addressed in a few moments' time.
Thank you very much. Any more questions? Councillor.
Again, I'm sort of reasonably new to the licensing committee. If over the next year or two you over-recover your costs with these new charges, is there a process for a refund? Does that come in the next period, or is it an annual or whatever?
The fees and charges are set annually. So if we found that we were over-recovering in a particular area, then we would look to offset that in the following year.
Thank you very much. Are we content to accept these recommendations? Good, thank you very much. That brings us on to second part, to approve the consultation on the Hackney carriage and private hire fees and charges.
Yeah, just to say really to the councillors and the trade who know this very well, I've been through this a few times now. The legislation requires us to go out to the press to consult on these fees and charges for any changes to the taxi and Hackney carriage and private hire licensing fees, not the other fees. So it's a public consultation. If there's any adverse comments in that, then we will come back to yourselves. Failing that, this will go to the council for adoption on the next full council meeting as part of the budget setting process.
Sorry, Councillor.
You've obviously talked with the taxi people. Have you? What is their feeling about this? I know we just voted it in. Is there I know one likes to pay anything, but are they seeing it as reasonably fair? It's just something I'd like to know in general terms, because as we was talking earlier, with less drivers, less this, less that, I think there's a lot of concern out there by the people in the trade, and I just wondered what feedback you was getting.
Well, we have plenty of members of the trade here this evening. I'm sure any one of those will give you some feedback as to how they feel about this. I think we certainly don't consult with the trade prior to setting the fees, and the reason being quite simply because the fees are set on the basis of what it costs us, or rather what percentage of the costs we can recover. Because we can't recover all our costs, so we always under recover. It's just a matter of minimising that under recovery. So anybody, including the trade, has a right to comment on this when we go into public consultation. Yep.
Thank you very much. That just leaves item 3, authorise the Head of Environment and Community Services to make minor administrative amendments if required. We're content with that? Yes. Good.
Right, so just a sort of two parts of this one really. One is a little bit of work that we will be doing over the next few months. So following some restructuring of the team, we have made more of our enforcement officers' time available, and that's for enforcement across the board. So we are undertaking proactive enforcement inspections, both in licensed premises and of licensed vehicles and drivers, and that will include going out with the police in a few months' time to stop drivers under the police stop powers and inspect vehicles, as well as our routine work up on the rank and our routine work with premises across the borough. As you well know, as I'm sure, the moment you start doing some enforcement work, you'll discover some things you need to enforce. And I think that's probably a fair statement of where we're at already. So thank you to Emma, who's been working hard on this to allow us to use the team much more effectively than we have been able to over recent years. The second part of this is a little presentation by my good self to you to look at some of the issues that Councillor Jones has addressed, and I will now attempt to interact with modern technology in a way that hopefully is positive for all. He said, please bear with me for a few seconds. like to stand up. I'll steal Councillor Jean's mic.
You want to sit here?
No, no, I'll stand. Many years of teaching. Yeah, that's looking hopeful, isn't it? Right, okay then. Right, marvellous. Okay, so can everybody at the back hear me? I'm rarely accused of having a quiet voice, but I just want to make sure. Okay, so basically a little driver and vehicle update from where we're at. He said, right, so the good news, we are processing 41 new driver applications. Of that 41, 40 are private hire and 1 is a new Hackney carriage driver. One out of 41. Well, I'm just letting you know the news. Bad news, there is still a national shortage of drivers. That's not just us, that's everywhere across the board. During the COVID pandemic, an awful lot of licensed drivers were struggling because there was no entertainment, there was no Saturday night, there was no Friday night. People weren't going out, they weren't going to pubs, they weren't drinking, they weren't out on business, they weren't taking their normal train journeys. All of those things absolutely hammered the trade, whether it's private hire or Hackney carriage. As a result of that, a lot of drivers left the profession and went and worked in those areas which are booming, which are delivery drivers for all the various companies, Amazon, etc., etc., or even just working in the warehouses for those distribution companies. So there has been a change in how the economy operates, and there has been pressure on the amount of workforce available to undertake private hire and Hackney carriage work. So, and that isn't going to change in the near future. But it's good to see that we've actually got 41 new drivers coming through. Is that going to solve our problems? No. But is it going to help, and is it the trend going in the right direction? Yes. So we can say that, which is good. No dark muttering. We'll deal with the dark stuff at the end. Right, so where are we with helping to improve that, which I think is the question you asked, Councillor Jones. So we're looking at producing a streamlined application pack. There are an awful lot of checks. Those of you who do your annual training with me for how we actually process driver applications know there are an awful lot of things hoops that we expect drivers to go through to promote public safety. It is a very long, drawn out and complicated process over which we have little or no control. But what we can do is we can streamline the application pack. So it's been totally rewritten by Emma and myself, plain English, simplified, lots of diagrams to make that a lot easier to understand and to work your way through logically and progressively. Driver handbook. So at the moment we have a taxi licensing policy which we require drivers to know. It is a bit like swallowing a whale. It is a huge document and it covers a whole load of things, most of which are irrelevant to your typical driver who is applying. So we are replacing that with a driver handbook that focuses on the things that actually matter and the things that we actually expect the drivers to know and to be able to deal with on a day-to-day basis. Lastly, and this is something that I'm going to ask you to think about as a group of councillors. We're not making a decision on this today. This is just about, please have a think for the next licensing meeting, is the trend amongst private hire is that drivers get their instructions through their PDA, their mobile phone. And that PDA tells them where they're going to go to pick up Mrs. Miggins. Once they picked up Mrs. Miggins, they're going to tell you how to get to where you're going to drop Mrs. Miggins off. So, and you are expected to follow that route. So it is something that, do we require those drivers, therefore, to have the same level of geographical knowledge as perhaps we might have done so? Now, I think that there is a difference here between what we expect of private hire drivers who receive their work through an electronic device and whose all movements are tracked by that device and who answer to an operator, compared to our colleagues in the Hackney carriage trade who will pick somebody up, usually from the station, and be asked to just drive somewhere in the borough. And therefore we expect them to have a much greater knowledge of the borough and to be able to just know where places are. That doesn't prevent them from using a sat-nav, but I would expect for most of them, I look to the trade at the back, you would probably deem that to be a loss of professional pride in knowing where you're going. Yeah, so I am not proposing the removal of the geographical element for Hackney carriage drivers because I think it's a core skill for those drivers.
Is that going to be a bit like the Uber drivers?
There is no such thing as an Uber driver, Councillor Putty, as you and I have discussed. An Uber driver is just another private hire driver. So, but your point is well made, Dan. It is exactly the same situation. The systems that Uber revolutionised the trade by bringing in, yeah, are now the utter mainstay for any decent-sized private hire company. They all do that model now. That change has happened. The industry is different to how it was 5 or 10 years ago, for example. Yeah, and therefore, do we need to consider, as an authority, changing the way we assess drivers to recognise that change within the trade and industry? Now, there's no decision on that today. Have a think about it. Yeah, when we do our next meeting, we will have an opportunity to discuss this at some length. Yeah, if any of you want to ask me or come and speak to me, as Tony's done, in between times, then I'm more than happy to speak on an intro basis to anybody. Okay.
So this suggestion is just for Hackney carriage or
just for private hire.
Private hire?
Yeah. Right, a subject near and dear to our colleague's heart: the average age of Hackney drivers. It does not make pretty reading. Yeah? So, our youngest driver is 38. Yeah. And the vast majority of our drivers are between 55 and 65. With 14 of our drivers effectively operating over what would deem to be the normal retirement age. And, you know, this is, yeah, all right, that's no self-nominating at the back. So, you know, this is difficult, and this identifies an issue that Pete and I have been chatting about for a long time, which is how do we encourage more people to enter the trade? If we were to do this for private hire drivers, then we would have a very, very different demographic, with a lot more younger drivers. And we'll come on to some of the barriers to entry into the Hackney carriage world in a minute or so. But I just put that up there as a fairly stark reminder that we are going to be losing a lot of drivers through coming to the end of their time. Yeah, they will be retiring as active drivers. We've only got 48 at the moment in our Hackney carriage stand. Now again, that reflects also, again, a change in the way that taxis, for the generic term, are hired. A few years ago, if you wanted to book a private hire car, you had to pick the phone up and you had to ring and make a booking with the person on the end of the line. And that was certainly the model that was envisaged in 1976 when that was set up. Now, most people do it through the smartphone and do it through the app. Yeah, which again, you know, it's an automated process. Yeah. Now I'm not saying well that's better or worse, but that's the way it is these days. Yeah. And that obviously challenges the key flexibility that the Hackney carriage has, which is that immediate hire without having to pre-book. Yeah. So, you know, there has been a big change in this. Where does that leave us with our main obstacle? Well, our main obstacle often is the price of the vehicle. And this graph might look a little obtuse to you, but effectively it is about the Euro status of the vehicle. So if you have a modern car, your vehicle is Euro 6 compliant. The further you go back, the lower the emission standards were. So Euro 6 is the current standard, and as you can see, the majority of our Hackneys are Euro 6. We've then got a good tranche 13 Euro 5, and then we've got 5 Euro 4s, which are the most polluting of the vehicles that we currently license. There is a straightforward correlation between the age of the vehicle and the level of emissions. That's incontrovertible. And that is why we currently have a 12-year limit on the age of Hackney carriages. So they've got to be at least, they can't be any more than 3 years old coming onto the fleet, and they will not be licensed past their 12th birthday, i.e. the date of their registration. Now, I know that this is an issue near and dear to some of our colleagues at the back of the room, and the advice we've always proffered the trade is you relicense your vehicle preferably as close to its 12th birthday as you can, because effectively you can squeeze another year out of it at that point. But these 5 vehicles that are left there are ones that have already been licensed just before the end of their 11th year. And that means that this year those vehicles will come to the end of the period with which we will, under our current regime, continue to license those vehicles. Now obviously those are the most polluting vehicles within the fleet. I've already been having a discussion with some members of the trade earlier on. I own a car that doesn't meet Euro 4, for example. Yeah? Should I be allowed to drive that round Basingstoke? Okay? I'm not making any value judgment on that. That's a statement of fact. But if we are looking to push forward our credentials as a low carbon council and to look at improving air quality for the residents of Basingstoke and Dean, then obviously improving the emissions outputs of all vehicles is the key way to go.
Are we talking about Euro status at how many of it we are saying that EV vehicles there are?
So within on the fleet at the moment, Councillor Putty, we have 1 ultra low emissions vehicle, which is the London Cab. Now that's not a zero emissions vehicle. It has a battery and a small petrol engine in it. But we've got 1 of those in the fleet.
So it's a hybrid?
A hybrid, yeah.
So we haven't got straight EV vehicles?
As of this time, there are very, very, very few purely electric Hackney carriage vehicles. Hackney carriage vehicles are expensive, bespoke items because of the requirements that we'll look at next. How do we deal with this? Well, one of the key issues is that there is physically a shortage of Hackney carriage vehicles on the market to purchase. If you were to go out today with a nice thick wallet, you'd struggle to find one even. So they're just simply not out there. The ones that are out there in reasonable numbers are, my last point here, the LEVC, that's London Electric Vehicle Company. That's your new style black cabs. And you can certainly walk up to LEVC and they will happily flog you one of those. It's about 60k. Yeah. Yeah. It depends on the spec, but that's the minimum spec that comes with ramps. That's the one. Yeah. No, that's just the cash price. That's the cash price.
So it's like £70,000.
Yeah. I think we can all agree that £60,000 is a lot of money. All right. Okay. So, bespoke cabs are expensive, and there is not a strong second-hand availability at the moment either. So the trade are in a difficult place. There's no two ways about that. And also, a lot of our drivers who have maintained their role in the trade through the COVID pandemic have been used to relying on their savings that they would previously have invested in a new vehicle or replacement vehicle just to get them through the COVID pandemic. So there's a double hit on Hackney vehicles at the moment. So how can we assist the trade? What are some of our possible solutions here? So one of our obvious ones is to extend the 12-year life. Now, I'm not going to make any bones for this. I think this is a difficult option for us as an authority, because certainly the 5 vehicles that would be in line for that extension are the 5 most polluting vehicles on the rank as we stand at this point in time, because those are the Euro 4 compliant.
Have we benchmarked this with other boroughs?
Can I finish and we'll take some questions at the end? So, there is a variety of different things that different boroughs do, yeah? But for example, over in Hart, and I know that Hart don't run bespoke Hackney carriage vehicles, they will not be licensing, full stop, anything new onto their fleet past 2025 that isn't either electric or an ultra low emissions vehicle. Yep, that's for everybody. Okay, so you know, our view of leaving vehicles on for 12 years at the moment is actually fairly generous by the local standards. So that's one option, to extend the 12-year period. The other one is to extend the age at which vehicles can come onto the fleet. And that effectively increases the pool of vehicles that are available to purchase. There's plenty of older cabs out there. So perhaps we could look to go for something, for example, from the current 3 years to 6 years, doubling that. Now that doesn't alter the 12-year life of the vehicle, and it does compress the potential working life of the vehicle. So there's a decision there for drivers and operators to make. But it would increase the number of vehicles that are available to drivers. The other option is to ease our current standard on the types of vehicles that we will license. So at the moment, we have set our bar at the highest possible level, which is the London taxi cab standard. That is, as we've seen, the most expensive vehicles that you can buy. Now, they've always been the most expensive vehicles you can buy, yeah? And if you were to compare even a standard TX vehicle, like we've got a fleet of, with vehicles that your average Skoda Octavia, like you might see running around as a private hire vehicle, it's night and day. But a rear loading vehicle, again, is literally half the price of an LEVC vehicle. That's still 30k for a brand new one, but again, there's another pool of those because, again, lots of other licensing authorities license those. And just to give you a little bit of an idea, so this is a current side-loading Hackney cab style vehicle that we would license on our fleet. So as you can see, the vehicle loads from the pavement directly into the vehicle, and the vehicle has enough turning space in there to allow the wheelchair to be parked backwards, so that the passenger faces backwards in the event of an impact. They're thrown into the back of the seat rather than out of the seat. So we license vehicles like this at the moment, but that's a big. It's either a taxi type vehicle for London style, or we have this bigger type, as you see here, the minibus type one. Either way, it's an expensive vehicle, but they're designed to last and designed to be operated for long periods. What your option is this type of vehicle, which is a rear loading vehicle. And on this type of vehicle, what you can see is you've got a big tailgate. Effectively, it's a small van rather than a larger van. And the back of the vehicle, you can see here, the bumper is cut and the bumper drops down to form the ramp. You wheel your wheelbarrow passenger in, the ramp comes back up, tailgate comes down, and they have a seatbelt system in the roof that straps the passenger in so they face forward, unlike you see in the ones that we operate at the moment, and they have a proper seatbelt and harness in there. When the wheelchair isn't being deployed, then obviously the vehicle stays up, the ramp stays up at the back, and the seats fold down, and they're a normal 5 to 7 seater vehicle. And again, they're based on a small van, so they're very roomy inside, and there's a whole load of those, whether it's a Citroen Berlingo, Peugeot Partner, Mercedes Ford, whatever, they all do those range of the vehicles. And I wanted to point that out so that you could just see the difference, okay? And obviously the key difference here is that you are loading your passenger from the road. They're not coming in from the pavement. Now, just to sort of put that in some context, here's me looking very stretched, and no prizes for guessing. You look a bit battered there, Pete, it has to be said. I think it's just the shadows on the vehicle, but no prizes for the distinctive blue hackney carriage at the front of the rank. Say again? Nothing. In the picture, it looks a bit battered due to the reflection on it, but it isn't. But this is the front of the rank. I was up there today chatting to the guys and clipped a photograph of the nose of Pete's vehicle. And as you can see, the curb here is a drop curb. Okay, you can see the tactile finish to mark it out for visually impaired users. So it would mean rather than loading from the pavement into the side of the vehicle, you'd have to take passengers round and into the back. Now, I'm not going to place a value judgment on that. It's a different style. And again, this is something I'd like you to think about. Yeah, perhaps keep an eye out for them. If you go into Windsor and Maidenhead is full of them, for example. They're all a lovely cream and purple colour, if I remember correctly. Okay, so lots of other authorities license these types of vehicles, all right, very successfully. And most of the journeys, remember, are not done with a wheelchair on board. But our nuclear option here is that we have no we have no standard for our hackney carriages. We just do a heart, and we say that any vehicle could be a hackney carriage. I'll tell you for now that means you can kiss goodbye to your wheelchair provision. Because why, as a driver, would you operate an expensive vehicle when you can operate a cheaper vehicle? Simple, basic economics dictates that. At the moment, we take a lot of traffic that comes out of London where people who are disabled can hop off the train in London, wheel themselves out here and hop into a wheelchair accessible vehicle. This is stuff for discussion at the next meeting. I asked Sven at the start, would he mind me setting you a bit of homework effectively, which is to have a think about some of these issues. So think about how you want to deal with the vehicle age. Think about whether you want to go down the route of this type of rear loading vehicle. Think about whether you want to have a relaxation on the geographical test for drivers to streamline the process and encourage more people to come onto the trade.
Isn't it important to consult with these guys?
Yeah, don't get me wrong. The guys are here. I mean, I'm sure that Sven will make a decision about how he wants to take questions or take comments from the trade today. Yeah. I think it would be probably fair to say that Pete, you represent the drivers on a number of occasions. We've had lots of discussions about this. I'm always open to this, and my preferred method there would be to have a trade meeting specifically to look at some of these issues so that we get the views of the trade before we come back and speak to you guys, so that we as officers can relay back to you as councillors, the people who make the decisions, what the views of the trade are. Yeah, I've got no interest as a licensing officer in doing anything that is going to be negative to the trade. Yeah, okay. Now, there's always a bit of tension between the regulatory side and the licensing side. That's always going to be there. But I've got no interest. I wouldn't be stood up at the rank as often as I am speaking to the drivers, and I was up there today speaking to people if I wasn't interested in what the trade had to say and respectful of their views. And I'm hoping that the trade would agree that I do at least rock up and speak to you and listen to what you've got to say. We may have disagreements over that occasionally, and I have been called some names on the rank, but I'm comfortable with that. Okay, I'll shut up now.
Thank you very much, Robert. So, can I ask the drivers? Do you wish to ask the odd question now while Robert's here?
Around the vehicle and the cars that shoot up our rank, doing 20, 30 mile an hour, even the HGV lorries shoot up there, and you can't expect a person to dodge lorries, cars, everything, when you've got a load up on the rear vehicle.
No, I mean, with
Snow conditions and things like that, you've got to take into consideration.
Yeah.
Because we won't be able to sweep the roads if it's snowing or icy, so how do you expect the people to do it?
Well, okay, fair enough. Very fair question. I think my comment to that would be that this is all going to be discussed and decisions made at the next committee meeting, which will be either in July or earlier this year, and that will be the time for these sort of matters to be raised and thought about and discussed before the committee makes the decisions. I mean, we've just been asked to think about it for the moment. No, well, I think they're very well made points. I mean, how one, I don't know whether Robert has any views about how one might encourage some of the new drivers coming forward to switch to hackney carriage, but that might be a difficult one.
Yeah, I think, you know, there are... Okay. I could tell that. Yeah. I think that there is there are always some options for us as a council as to how we spend our money to promote green objectives. As you are aware, we had a demo a few months back now of a TX taxi that had been converted to purely electric. Now, I know there were some concerns about that, but again, one of the issues on there was whether there was some council funding to ease that in. I am perfectly happy to raise that with the climate change side of the council. Again, that will be a decision for the councillors to take.
Councillor Frost.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to go back to slide 1 of your presentation, Rob. Okay, very informative as it was, but you said there was a national shortage of drivers, and you only put up the general terms saying there were 41 new drivers, one of being a Hackney cab. What would be the splits between the Hackney side and then the private hire side, and against the total national picture? Are we representative of the national picture, or do we have a bigger shortage or smaller shortage? Okay, and how is that going to be split between the two sides? Now, I'm not really asking for an answer now. Maybe that's something you, if necessary, you go away and come back to the committee, okay, with the information. But if you've got the figures now, that'd be great.
Okay, well, I'm not going to, there's a lot of figures potentially in there, but what I would say is that it does vary a lot between authorities. So depending on the type of vehicle that is specified for Hackney carriage. So if you were to ask that question in Hart, for example, which is our sister licensing organisation, then we, as a licensing authority, license far more Hackney carriage vehicles than we do private hire in Hart, because effectively there is no difference between the vehicles. So it doesn't cost any more or less to be a private hire driver or a Hackney carriage driver in Hart, because the vehicle is the big difference. Here we have the gold standard of vehicle, which is the London style taxi. So here we have an awful lot more private hire than we do hacks. I don't know how many private hires have we got. So we've got 270 private hire vehicles, yeah, and we've got 47 Hackney carriages, yeah, which reflects the cost of purchasing into the trade. Yeah, simple as that. Yeah. So there's, there is no doubt that we expect a lot of our Hackney carriage drivers with regard to the capital investment therein.
Chair, I thought we were on questions, and we've seemed to have evolved into discussion. I'm just wondering where the meeting's going, because there's lots of figures that we want and not here, so we're not having an informed discussion at the present time. Figures are being thrown out. I want to see something on paper that I can get my teeth into, and then I can have a proper discussion.
Your comments. I think, the useful thing about having the questions answered is that as we're all being required to sit here and think about these issues before the next committee meeting, if we can air some of the concerns and listen to some of the possible solutions or otherwise, that could be useful. But I take what you're saying. We are going a bit off piste on that. So maybe we're getting close to closing the meeting now.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, I think it's really useful to have the discussion. I know it's not necessarily clarifying exact points and figures, but if what we're going to do is go away and think about ways of moving forward, then I think the discussion is very important. What I wanted to ask you is this. You say 270 private hire drivers, 47 Hackney carriages. If I decided to have a career change and driving a taxi is absolutely what I want to do from now until retirement, what would encourage me, or why would I want to be a hackney carriage driver as opposed to a private hire driver? What advantages are there other than I'm going to have to spend an awful lot of money to be a hackney carriage driver? Thank you.
I think that some of our colleagues at the end of the room may do this because some of them have been doing it for a very long time. But I suspect my basic answer there is control. If you are a hackney carriage driver, then you are generally a one-person business. Yeah, we do have some drivers who are operators who are more than one hackney carriage, but on the whole, you are an independent entity who decides when you want to work and when you don't want to work, and you take the jobs as they come. If you're a private hire driver, then you must, by law, work through an operator, and it is that operator who sends you the work and controls that work for you. So it's a different relationship to how you run your life, if you like. Now, the advantage of the private hire is that the entry cost is a lot lower. And whilst we've got a large number, and as you've seen, we've got a lot of long-term drivers in the hackney carriage world, I suspect for a lot of our private hire drivers, not all of them, but quite a lot of them, it will be deemed to be an entry profession. So they would work as a private hire driver for a number of years and then move on to a different role. Whereas for our hackney carriage drivers who are owner operators, then it is a choice of career.
And then we'll close the meeting. Thank you. Councillor Patty and then Councillor Jones. Thank you.
Yes, Chairman. From the presentation, the one thing that really I found a little bit concerning to me is the safety aspect, because what we are told that the wheelchair can go round in that racing traffic where it is, and also the other aspect that I got, the one that we were shown about the van and the rear way of going. I can see as if there is a problem with a wheelchair just going up at the top of the ramp, somebody going in taller, the headroom is very, very little there.
Having seen lots of these vehicles, I don't think headroom is your main problem. But I can see why you might be concerned about that. But as I say, that's not generally the thing, because there is a minimum aperture.
Councillor Jones.
I wonder, as a question, could we look at some form of leasing through the council, where it's so that what we've really been talking about, if we want to remain as a black cab, as we've got now, but in an environment where it's an electric vehicle, it's a lot of money. Now, the only way that can be done, listening to all sides, if they can get either cheap money, which isn't about nowadays, or some form of leasing. As a council, we should be looking to see what we don't, not going to pay for it, but we must have some way into some of these companies so these guys could actually lease off of these companies, maybe through the council or something like that. I wonder if we could look at something along those lines, because we can talk around the table as long as we like, but at the end of the day, how many people in reality can, with the trade the way it is, can afford 60 grand plus, and it is plus, because it won't stay at that, to replace their cabs in, 3-4 years' time, if we're talking electric. We should be trying to facilitate the drivers, because they do come under us, the authority, even though they work for themselves. Now, if we want to lose them, it'd be easy. We just say, well, we'll go along the lines. Don't matter what cab you have now, just get one, whatever, pink, blue, whatever, and just put a sign up. That'd be the cheapest option, but we don't want that as a council, so we should be trying to facilitate, trying to find if we can get any leasing companies involved through the council or through the Taxi Federation or something like that, that can give them an opportunity to get the vehicles at a cheaper rate or something they can afford when they're out there. Because that at the bottom line, we can talk all day around it, but it's not going to change the figures. The figures are there. And I think sometimes we've got to get to the point of what can we do as a council. If we can't do nothing, tell them you're going to have to pay 60 grand, lads, whether you want it or not, and that's it. And let's be honest about it. Sounds good that we're talking like it, but at the end of the day, we've got to try and do something.
Yeah, I can hear some murmurings from and I'll speak to you in the trade meeting, gentlemen. So we will represent your views. The issue here is that for the vast majority of people, I certainly didn't pay for my car fully up front because I couldn't afford to run the car I run today if I had to pay it up front. So, and the taxi trade and the Hackney carriage trade is no different to that. And this is the point that Pete and the gentleman were making, that whilst the gross figure is way exceeds the actual purchase price of the vehicle, because if you're leasing the vehicle, which is what the majority of drivers would do, then the actual cost and interest, etc., is far higher than that. So yes, the reality here is that we would need to look at a scheme where we, as a local authority, we would not purchase the vehicles. It's not viable for us to do that, but we would make a contribution to that cash cost, if you like, an upfront payment that would reduce the monthly leasing costs of the vehicle. Is the way that most authorities who do this operate.
I think that sounds about right, but I do wonder, if this was a company, you get more into companies because you're big, you've got money, everything else, and I just wonder, well, we can use some of that for this council. We've got a leasing scheme. I'm not suggesting we go to the same thing, but there must be somewhere that, as a council, saying we need cabs. What can you do for us? How can you get these guys to do it? They've got to buy it. We're not, but so if we can get them a deal, it's basically what the private hire people do, isn't it? You know it. They go and buy a load of Skodas or whatever, cheaper than what we'd buy them, and that's all you see going round. I'm just saying, as a council, perhaps we could, I'm not saying it will work, but perhaps someone in the council who knows a bit more about these leasing cars and everything else could look at it, see what we could actually come up with. It's a long-term thing, maybe, but if we don't start it off, we never will.
Thank you, everybody. I think we can close the meeting now at 7:35. Now, I think we took the last councillor.
I want to talk about the work programme. Is that all right?
Yeah, don't ask me. I'm not the chair.
I just want one question on the work programme.
Okay, fine.
Sorry.
Thank you. No.
It's on the agenda. And it's a simple question, and it might be a stupid question. Tables and chairs and street trading policy consultation. Who are we consulting with? The tables and the chairs. Well, I've just.
We'll be consulting those that already have licences, because the costs and the policy will affect them. So there's a number of venues throughout the council that already have table and chairs licences.
What about the ones that will refuse licences?
They won't be part of the consultation. We'll also the consultation will also be to the fire, police, and all of the responsible authorities.
Thank you very much. We'll wrap it up if we may now. Thank you for everybody's contribution, and we'll look forward to seeing you all in July or a bit earlier.